The maitre d' recognized me immediately as my family stepped into Monarch, the most exclusive modern American bistro in downtown Austin, Texas. I saw the flicker in his eyes, that pause of recognition. But he remained composed, professional. "Good evening," my sister Caroline said, her tone effortlessly superior. "Reservation for the Caldwell family, party of 4. I stayed a step behind, watching the familiar scene unfold, my parents and Caroline putting on a performance. The designer handbags, the custom suits, the pointed glances to see who might be watching. Appearances always mattered to them. They hadn't wanted to invite me tonight, but not having the eldest Caldwell daughter at my father's 65th birthday dinner, that would have raised questions in their social circle, and image was everything. "This way," the maitre d' said, guiding us through the stunning dining room. I noticed the discreet nods from staff, subtle acknowledgments they tried to mask. But I saw them. Caroline gave my outfit a minimalist navy dress, a once-overs. "I'm shocked you didn't show up in one of your thrift store pieces, Leah." Smiled. "Some of us care more about impact than price tags." She raised an eyebrow. "Right. How's that tiny condo treating you?" Before I could answer, my mother shot us a look. "Girls, not tonight. It's your father's birthday." Dad was already scowling at the wine list, muttering, "These markups are criminal." I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. I knew the real wholesale price of every bottle on that menu. "Leah should double-check the prices," Caroline muttered to Mom. "Wouldn't want her making a scene." That's when our waiter approached, Eli, one of my most trusted hospitality managers. I watched as my family barely glanced at him, registering him only as staff. Dismissed. Invisible. "Can you even afford this place?" Caroline scoffed. "Maybe just order a side salad." Then Ellie spoke. "Welcome back, Miss Caldwell. I apologize. Your usual table was taken by another guest, but I hope this one is to your liking." Dad coughed mid-sip. Mom's hand twitched, knocking over her silverware. Caroline's smirk froze like glass. "It's perfect," I said, turning to Eli with a calm smile. "Would you care for your regular wine, Miss Caldwell?" he asked, as if this weren't the most deliciously disruptive moment of my year. "Yes, the 1990 Merus Reserve." Dad turned ashen. That bottle cost more than one of his quarterly golf trips. "Leah," Mom's voice cracked slightly. "What is going on?" I took a long, slow sip of water, then folded my hands in my lap. "Nothing, really, just dinner." I paused. "Though I suppose it feels different when the beggar owns the building." "Oh, didn't I mention," I said, swirling the wine in my glass. "I bought Monarch 6 months ago, along with the entire Silverstem restaurant group." Caroline's mouth opened, then shut again like a stunned fish. But you live in that tiny condo, and you shop at normal places," Mom added, baffled. "Because I choose to," I replied evenly. "Some of us don't need designer logos to feel accomplished." Eli returned, presenting the wine with expert flourish. "An excellent choice, as always, Miss Caldwell. Shall I have Chef Murray prepare your favorite chocolate soufflé for dessert?" "That would be lovely," I smiled. "And please bring us the full tasting menu. It's a special occasion after all." He nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Silence settled like fog across the table, the kind that drapes over people who realize they've spent the last 20 minutes mocking the person signing the staff's paychecks. My phone buzzed, likely an update from our London partners finalizing the Mayfair expansion. But I ignored it. Tonight wasn't about the business. It was about this moment. This beautiful, awkward, satisfying moment. The irony was delicious. The struggling daughter they pitied, the one who never quite measured up, now owned the very chain of fine dining spots they used to parade their status. And I hadn't said a word until now. Because the best revenge isn't boasting. It's letting people embarrass themselves first. Dad gulped his water like it was whiskey. Caroline had one hand hidden under the table, probably Googling Silverstem ownership. Her other hand trembled slightly as she adjusted her bracelet. I picked up my menu even though I knew it by heart. and pretended to peruse the dishes. Dinner was just beginning. The tasting menu arrived in waves: truffle-stuffed quail, saffron bisque, wagyu tartare with smoked egg yolk, each plate more exquisite than the last. Chef Murray was clearly showing off. My family, on the other hand, barely touched their food. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. So, how exactly did this happen? I took a sip of the perfectly aged Maris Reserve and met his gaze. Remember that MBA program I begged you to help with, the one focused on hospitality and systems innovation? You said it was a waste, that I should get a real degree like Caroline's. He shifted in his chair. Caroline stared a little too intently at her untouched foie gras. Well, I continued, turns out there was a market for reinventing fine dining operations. I built a scalable model with predictive analytics, AI-driven service mapping, and vertical integration. Mom blinked slowly. In English, Leah? I smiled. I made luxury restaurants more profitable without compromising experience. We now own 32 restaurants across 3 continents. Her fork slipped from her fingers and clattered onto her plate. 32? Yes. Including La Maison in Paris, Le Cercle in New York. I turned to Dad. And that little spot in London, where you and Mom celebrated your anniversary last year. He went pale. You bragged about how impossible it was to get a table. Caroline flushed a shade deeper than the burgundy velvet booths around us. I signed off on your reservation myself. And then I picked up my wine glass again, savoring the moment. Because for once, I didn't have to prove anything. They were sitting in it, living it, and now they finally saw me. That's why they seated us immediately when I dropped the Caldwell name, Dad muttered, eyes narrowing. Indeed, I said, setting down my glass. Though you really shouldn't be rude to the staff here. I let that sit a moment before adding, they tell me everything. As if summoned, Eli returned with the next course, a beautifully plated scallop dish that shimmered with golden beurre blanc and delicate edible flowers. This is Chef Murray's newest creation, he said, placing the plates down with care. She'd like your opinion, Miss Caldwell, before it's added to the seasonal tasting menu. Dad blinked, not because of the scallop, but because he was beginning to understand. The same man who once told me I was wasting my future by chasing glorified hospitality instead of joining his investment firm was now sitting in a restaurant I owned, watching a chef seek my approval. I took a bite, flawless as expected, and dabbed the corner of my mouth. London opens next month, I said casually, reaching for my water. We're already booked solid through September. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. But you said you couldn't afford to join us for our London trip last summer. I was there, I replied, overseeing final construction details on the new flagship. I just stayed in my penthouse instead of the family's hotel. Caroline's phone buzzed on the table. Probably one of her socialite friends texting something breathless like, "You're at Monarch with her?" She didn't look up. "Is that why you never upgraded your apartment?" she asked. "Or bought anything designer?" "I prefer to invest in things that matter," I said. "Like paying my staff the highest wages in the industry, giving them health benefits, tuition reimbursement." I let that sink in. Creating something real instead of just flaunting wealth. The sommelier arrived with another bottle and leaned in discreetly. "Miss Caldwell, the investment group is here again. They'd like to speak with you." I smiled. "Tell him the usual, Philippe." He gave a respectful nod. "Not for sale at any price." Dad stared. "Investment group?" "Morgan Stanley," I said simply. "They've been trying to acquire the chain for months. Last week they offered 12 times earnings." The way his face changed, an investment banker watching the daughter he dismissed as a creative liability become the architect of a multi-continent empire, was priceless. Mom leaned forward, softening. "Darling, why didn't you tell us? We'd been so worried about you living so immodestly." I gestured around the dining room. Every detail, from the hand-blown light fixtures to the custom marble floors, had passed through my hands. "Because success isn't about how loudly you announce it, Mom," I said. "It's about building something that matters. something that lasts. No trust fund, no family connections, just grit. Caroline's expression had morphed from judgment to calculation. "Oh," she said, her voice syrupy. "About getting reservations. Still need to be made in advance," I cut in with a smile. Then I raised my glass and said nothing more. Because sometimes silence speaks loudest. If you've ever dreamed of turning quiet strength into something unforgettable, subscribe now, because the next part of Leah's journey proves that owning the room is only the beginning. "Your name doesn't guarantee special treatment anymore," I said lightly, lifting my glass. "In fact," I added with a sweet smile, "you might notice some of our restaurants are mysteriously booked next time you call." The dessert cart arrived then, led by Eli himself. At the center was Chef Mireille's signature soufflé, delicately risen, perfectly timed. It was paired with a 1989 vintage port that easily cost more than Caroline's newest designer purse. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said warmly, raising my glass again. "Consider dinner my treat." I let the next sentence land like velvet. "As it's been every single time you've dined in one of my restaurants for the past year." It wasn't just about ownership anymore. No, the most satisfying part was knowing they'd been eating at my tables under my name, never realizing they were on my tab the entire time. The port was excellent, almost as excellent as watching my family choke down their pride with their dessert. As coffee was served, the dynamic shifted palpably. The quiet arrogance that had filled the table an hour earlier had evaporated. Caroline tried flattery instead of insults now, asking about culinary trends and smiling too brightly. Mom kept name-dropping friends she claimed would love to invest in my next big thing. Dad sat quietly, stirring his espresso, replaying years of smug speeches about legacy and financial acumen. The same man who once told me restaurant work was cute like a hobby. "Miss Caldwell," Eli said, approaching once more. "Chef Mireille requests your presence in the kitchen when convenient. The London menu is ready for your final approval." Caroline straightened up instantly, eyes gleaming. "Oh, can I come? I'd love to see the kitchen." I didn't miss the sudden cheer in her voice, the shift from mocking me to wanting access. "The kitchen is for staff and ownership only," I said politely. "Health regulations, you understand." Mom leaned in with a softened tone. "Darling, you must let us host something." "A celebration. To think, our own daughter so successful." "A restaurant owner," I finished for her. "Interesting. That wasn't worth celebrating when you thought I was just managing one place." The sommelier returned, handing me a sleek leather folder. "The final wine list for London, Miss Caldwell. Also, Mr. Thompson called with updates on the Tokyo project." Dad's head jerked up. "Tokyo? Opening next spring," I confirmed smoothly, glancing at Caroline. "Though Caroline can tell you all about it. She was just in Paris last month, trying to use the Caldwell name to get a table at Maison Verte." Caroline's face flushed red. I didn't know. And my staff would tell me every name drop, every rude comment, every complaint about prices. I smiled. "I know everything that happens in my restaurants." I stood, smoothing the simple black dress they had once mocked, though it was actually a custom piece from a tiny Parisian atelier. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I said, glancing toward the kitchen. "My chef is waiting." And this time, no one dared to follow me. But it's Dad's birthday dinner," Mom protested, her voice shaky. "And I've paid for it," I said calmly, "just like I've paid for every meal you've had in my establishments this past year." I turned slightly toward Eli, who stood nearby with practiced poise. "Please make sure my family has everything they need," I said, "and at the standard gratuity to their bill." "Of course, Miss Caldwell," Eli replied with a small nod. "Your bill?" Caroline squeaked, her voice barely above a whisper. I gave her a soft smile. Just because I own the place doesn't mean everything's free. I turned to Dad. "That wouldn't be very good business, would it?" He said nothing. I walked into the kitchen, where Chef Mireille greeted me with her usual bright grin. She quickly pulled out the preliminary menu for the London location. thoughtfully composed and beautifully seasonal. We debated wine pairings, talked about sourcing local produce, and discussed a pastry concept involving Earl Grey cream and citrus glaze. Through the kitchen's viewing window, I could still see my family seated at the table, huddled close, whispering in a way they never had when they thought they were in control. Then my phone buzzed. A text. "Caroline, I'm sorry for everything, for how we treated you." Another ping. "Mom, we were wrong, so wrong." And finally, the one that surprised me the most. "Dad, I never saw it. Your vision, your potential. Can we talk, please?" I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed out one response and sent it to all three of them. "Reservations required. 3-month waiting list. No exceptions." Then I silenced my phone and turned back to Chef Murray, to the work that had built everything they had refused to see. Later that evening, I returned home, my so-called modest apartment. What they didn't know, what they never cared to find out, was that the entire top floor of the building belonged to me. Open concept, minimally furnished, not because I couldn't afford more, but because I liked it this way. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked over to the framed article by the door. The first review after I bought Monarch, back when it was still struggling and anonymous. Unknown buyer transforms local bistro into culinary empire. Unknown. Underestimated. Unstoppable. I traced the edge of the frame with my fingers, then picked up my phone, opened a new message, and typed one last note to my family. Next time you judge someone's worth, remember, the person you're looking down on might actually own the ground you're standing on. I set the phone down and opened my laptop. The Tokyo expansion plan was waiting. Renderings of the rooftop garden and a new AI-driven reservation system blinked back at me. Because success was never about proving them wrong. It was about continuing to prove myself right. And sometimes, the sweetest taste isn't in the rarest wine or the most perfect soufflé. It's in the quiet moment they finally realize. Keep dining in your success all along. If you've ever been the quiet one at the table, the one dismissed, doubted, or overlooked, then you know exactly how I felt sitting through that dinner. And if something in my story resonated with you, I hope you'll take a moment to share your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you would have said, what you're building, or how you're rising in your own quiet, relentless way. Leave a comment below. Tell me where you are in your journey. Tell me what you're fighting for. Because the truth is, it's not about proving anyone wrong, it's about proving yourself right. Again and again. With grace, with grit, with every small win that no one claps for until it's undeniable. Success doesn't always wear a label or live in a penthouse lined with gold. Sometimes it looks like showing up when no one expects you to. Sometimes it's knowing that what you've built speaks louder than anything you could say. And sometimes the sweetest moment is when those who once looked down on you suddenly realize you're the foundation they've been standing on. If you've made it this far in my story, I hope you'll subscribe not just to the channel, but to the idea that quiet strength can change everything. The next chapter is always being written, and maybe, just maybe, your voice belongs in it too. So keep building, keep believing, keep becoming, and I'll see you at the next table, the one with your name on it. I parked my 2012 Honda Accord between a matte, dark Porsche